a veteran of the world of science fiction, fantasy, and horror. He has published over 300 short stories and many novels. 20 novels, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
His knowledge about science fiction is off the charts since he was a kid and loved The Wizard of Oz. Dr. Rosenman taught in the Department of English and Foreign Languages here at NSU for many years. And he is certainly a friend of our departments and our universities. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Dr. John Rosenman.
Not being here from the beginning. I'd like to welcome you to the 2015 William Carroll Writers Festival. I was an office mate, the office mate of Dr. Carroll for about 15 years. I remember him well, very affectionately, and so for me, this literary festival has an extra meaning. Dan introduced me as a science fiction, fantasy, and horror writer, but I also write other things. For example, late last year, I published a young adult novel, no science fiction, etc. in it. It's available in hardback, trade paperback, Kindle, and yes, as an audiobook. We did make an offer to a movie producer, but nothing yet. Thank you. You can clap. A short story is a short piece of prose fiction aiming at unity of characterization, theme, and effect. And that's all I'm going to say in the way of definition. Except that one thing, if you want to write a short story, one thing that really helps is if you have some kind of hook or a tension-grabbing introduction to the story. It doesn't have to be something that hits you over the head, but it has to be something that lures you in and piques your interest. The first story is called The Blue of Her Hair, The Gold of Her Eyes. I thought it was a nice title. If I could write a story as good as the title, I think I would have accomplished something. Actually, this story won Creditors and Editors 2011 contest, readers contest in the science fiction and fantasy area. How many of you have ever been sick? Became really sick? How many of you ever acquired a real disease that you couldn't figure out what it was? It couldn't be diagnosed. This happened to me about a year or so after I published this story. It happened to me when I was at Norfolk State. I lost 30 pounds, my system shut down, and I developed a hideous scarlet rash over most of my body. It's like hell. No one knew what it was. My doctor said, I don't know what it is. I said, could I have cancer? So sometimes events like this happen. This is about a woman in a society called the state who develops a mysterious disease, and everybody is frightened and horrified by it and shuns her. Everybody shuns her. It's something which is 50 times worse than AIDS. I mean, no one even mentions its name or what it is. So the blue of her hair, the gold of her eyes, begins like this, with Rochelle Ross getting the diagnosis from her doctor. When Dr. Wellman told Rachel the results of her biopsy, her whole world crumbled. She stared at him. It's not cancer? Her voice sounded far away, as if someone else had spoken. I wish it were. However, when the cells I excised were exposed to iodine, they crystallized within seconds. We should operate immediately. You do understand, Mrs. Ross? I do. She knew the cell's swift transformation in iodine pointed to the deadly prognosis people whispered and spread rumors about every day on television and radio and internet chat rooms. It was everywhere. Trembling with fear, she touched her left breast. Like other soft tissue areas, it was especially vulnerable to the disease. Though there was no pain or tenderness, she knew the biopsy left no doubt. Of course, he said, not looking up from her file, you understand the authorities will have to be informed. It was up to Rachel to tell her husband. She knew other men had abandoned their wives or turned away from them. Frank, though, was a psychiatrist. If he couldn't be understanding and compassionate, nobody could. When she told him, though, his usual calm face twisted. If he couldn't be understanding and compassionate, nobody could. Frank, he ran the test 3 times. He even had a colleague confirm the results. Frank looked away. I see. She took a step forward, stopped as he stiffened. Frank, we never spoke about it, but we knew what I might have when they called about my mammogram. Oh God, Rachel, if it was only something different, like cancer or AIDS or trailed off. How the hell did you get this? Rachel's lip trembled. Frank, it's not my fault. He frowned. It's a casework you do. God knows what kinds of infections these people carry. Slums among factories and smokestacks. I think the pollution started this terrible thing in the first place. You were always proud I was a social worker. She touched her left breast, which still felt unchanged. Damn it, I'm still the same person I always was. I'm still your wife. He swallowed hard, still not looking at her. I want to help you. Honest. He wrung his hands, looking afraid of what might be on them. My God, do you know what happens when you get this disease? What they do if a doctor like me gets it? They come without warning and snatch you away. They wouldn't do that to you, Rachel said. Oh no? Remember George Miller, the surgeon who lived down the street? One night they came and no one ever saw him again. We don't know what happened to George. Besides, they haven't even proven it's contagious. With me, they can operate. It's still at an early stage. Rachel, you saw the news. Even if only a few cells are left, they can metastasize overnight. A year or 2 will pass. You'll think you're all right. Then one day, out of nowhere, the first symptoms will strike. She stood silent. In the distance, a clock ticked. I'm sorry, he said, managing a smile. I'll do everything I can to help you. Everything. Rachel watched her husband reach out to comfort her. He stopped, shuddered, and left the room. It's called Karma in a Drain Pipe. And I think after I read this, you may have lost all respect for me. I'll take a chance. As I told Dan, I only work about an hour a year anyway. When I get in here. But have you ever done any plumbing? Ever tried to get underneath the sink and figure out what's going wrong, unplug it, anything like that? And the second question, have you ever had a teacher, maybe way back in the day, maybe in elementary school or middle school, which we call junior high, when I was a student, that you hated, who was mean to you?
Yes.
Really? Well, I combined these 2 elements, which came from a real-life experience when I spent a couple frustrating hours trying to work in our kitchen sink. So don't lose too much respect for me. I warned you. Karma in the drain pipe. You'll never guess what I found in my drain pipe. My wife had been nagging me to fix the kitchen sink. Now the drain was clogged, and she had to empty the sink into pots and plug them to the bathroom. I always like to have my wife do that for me. You'd think I'd be ashamed to let her do that. After all, isn't the man supposed to be the head of the family, the Mr. Fix-It around the house? Except I'm neither. To tell the truth, I'm a bit lazy. But I'm not a slut. When Esther banged her knee carrying a particularly heavy pot to the job, I thought it was time to rectify what Clorox and a plumber's friend couldn't. Either that or take out a second mortgage and call in a real plumber. Dressed in my oldest clothes, I hunted down my rusty toolbox. I approached the kitchen sink with concern. What I knew about plumbing could fit on a piece of confetti. I turned off the water valve, picked up the largest wrench, and tackled the elbow-shaped pipe. My muscles trembled as I tried to undo a knot. I soon realized it wouldn't work. What looked like a nut was actually part of the pipe, and would break if I continued. I sighed in despair, knowing I had already exhausted my bag of tricks, and Esther would soon pick me apart to get another failure. Then I noticed the middle of the pipe was held by a plastic nut, and the lower part by two clamps. Eureka! Within minutes, I had the elbow part off, which unfortunately turned out to be clean. I held it up to Esther, who just entered the kitchen. She cut short my explanation. Less talk, more action. Why do you always take so long to do something? I waited while she just dissected me like a frog. She finally left, and I picked up a wire doodad and inserted it tentatively into the now open pipe, pretending it was Esther's mouth. Just say ah. I watched the wire disappear. 6 inches, 8, 10. A scream. I snatched it back. What the hell? I decided it must be my imagination. But just to make sure, I leaned forward and peered into the pipe. A galactic swirl of stars against an infinite night. There had to be a zillion of them. I pulled back and scratched my head. What were stars doing in my drain pipe? What kind of plumber would I call to fix it? I slowly reinserted the wire. Silence. But I hit an obstruction that repeated probing couldn't loosen. I withdrew the wire. Something was attached. I held it up to my eyes and caught my breath. Straddling the wire was a little old woman about 2 inches tall. And she was glaring at me. Well, don't just sit there, Bernard. Put me down. I jumped almost out at her. Could it be? Yes, she was much older now, but there was no doubt. It was Miss Smedley, my 5th grade homeroom teacher. I obeyed numbly, just as I had 40 years ago. I placed her on the floor. She stood up and kicked the wire aside. It's about time you got me out of there. I've been listening to your poor wife complain about this thing for a week now. I rubbed my eyes. It was Miss Smedley, all right. The Bible-spouting witch who would cast a dark spell over my childhood. The cause of my worst nightmares. The other teachers had been nice, but Miss Smedley had ruined everything. She constantly punished me, twisting my ear half off, pulling me screaming from my desk to the blackboard, where I stood in disgrace for the rest of the period, or locking me in that small, dark closet until I'd almost lose my mind. Wait a minute. Miss Smedley was dead. I read her obituary last week. I cleaned my throat and told her so. I know I'm dead, Bernard, she said, stamping her foot. The point is, I want to move on. Move on? To heaven, Bernard. I want to receive my eternal reward. She glared at me as if I were a dull pupil. All I could think of was that the tight, gray ball of hair behind her head looked like a grenade. She shook her head, a gesture I remembered. You always were a slow boy, she said, so you want to pay attention. She stiffened, displaying the erect posture she demanded when we said the Pledge of Allegiance. A week ago, I passed away. Mercifully, it was a short illness. And since I'd always been an upright, God-fearing woman, I look forward to opening my eyes in paradise. But what did I find? I go, a kid again, without an answer. I don't know, Miss Medley. What did you find? I found myself in your drain pipe, Bernard. You were shoveling meatloaf right down on top of me. Even after all these years, I recognize your spineless voice. You'd think after your wife reminded you a few times, you'd get it through your thick skull that the disposal was only meant to accommodate table scraps. Yet you force everything down it but the kitchen sink. I was exposed to all manner of disgusting substances. She shook her head. You still haven't learned a thing, have you, Bernard? I hung my head, humiliated. But Miss Medley was dead. The only reason I was talking to her was because Drano hadn't done its job. I smiled, but apparently you haven't learned a thing either, Miss Medley. What's that? She cocked her head like a cat about to pounce. What did you say to me, Bernard? I bent down. Just a suggestion. But it seems to me that folks who croak and wake up in other people's drain pipes could do with a little humility. Now you listen to me, Bernard. No, you listen to me, Miss Medley. For starters, it's Bernie. Bernie is what I like to be called. It's what all the kids call me. I told you that, but you never listened. I leaned closer so my face was only a few inches away. I've half a mind to take a deep breath and blow you to hell, Miss Medley. Or wash you down my throat with a nice cold Schlitz.
Ooh.
I made a face. On second thought, you'd probably poison me. This could take place 200 years ago, 500 years ago, 1,000 years ago. I came up with the idea of a Nigerian village in which there is a young man who's what you might call a futuristic painter. How many artists are in the house here? Well, if you lived in Nigeria, say around the year 1900 or 1800, artistry was usually related to household items, to implements of war and battle. But I came up with the idea of an expressionistic artist, a Nigerian boy, about 15 or 16, and nobody understands him. And one day, Ekwefi, the proud 15-year-old daughter of the tribal chief, invites him into, through her father, the chief, into her oval, her hut, her home, to paint her body. And he's in love with her. Boy, is he in love with her, and in lust. And here's a scene in which I describe what happens. The title of the story is Eyes of the Leopard. Eyes of the Leopard. I start by saying, one day, Ekwefi, the proud daughter of the tribal chief, decided she wanted to be especially beautiful for the Feast of the New Yam. She thought, and then she smiled. Perhaps Amadi, the odd boy who drew such strange pictures, could help her. And he's invited, and I skip forward into the story. Amadi knelt before Ekwefi's delectable body, a brush held in his hand. But this close to her living, breathing flesh, he forgot all his intentions. His dilemma was not helped by her knowing smile, nor by the day's heat and the room's tiny window. Sitting, Ekwefi continued to perspire, moisture shining on her skin like morning dew. He wanted to lean forward and lick it off. You're all over it too. Prudently, he picked up a cloth gently blotted her skin before reviewing his colors. What should he use first and for what? A blur of no movement. Turning to the door, he gasped, seeing the chief's great, impressive bulk. Luzahulu was so fat he had 3 or 4 chins, and he always wrapped his girth in gaudy cloth, as if to call attention to it. "Serve my daughter well," he ordered. "Make her even more beautiful than she is." "That would be impossible, my chief." Luzahulu wrinkled his great brows and left. Before he did go, Amadi saw all the way down to the man's soul. Why, this was no great lord of the clan. Luzahulu was a tower of luster and lard, with no understanding of anything beautiful. Emboldened, he turned back to the girl, meeting her assured smile with one of his own. As he did, he remembered exactly what he wanted to paint. That Wethi had wished him to honor the earth goddess. Very well. He would glorify the earth on her skin. Everything that grew in nature would grow there also. The brush no longer felt alien, but part of his flesh. Confidently, he dipped it in green pigment. He began by painting plants and clusters of leaves on Ekwethi's stomach, tracing vibrant tendrils that wrapped around and across the soft, delicate breasts. Occasionally, his fingers trembled with the need to caress her and to be caressed in return, to press her lovely body close to his. She herself often giggled, either at the brush's touch or because she sensed his desire. Sometimes, as if to tease him, she even squirmed, so he had to wait until she was still. In honor of the new yam festival, he called plump yams into being, surrounding their swollen tubers with lush green leaves. When he was finished with her belly, he adorned her slender arms and legs with nature's bounty. A tall, leaf-eating giraffe reared its neck along one arm, a drinking horn overflowing with rich palm wine wrapped around the other. On one of her exquisite legs, he created a long, mighty Niger, thick with crocodiles. On the other, he painted all the bright, glorious flowers of the forest. Amadi moved to Ekwethi's back, the fragrance of her flesh filling his senses. She smelled like the earth, rich, fertile, vast, and wet. Hearing her breath quicken, he felt his excitement rise and willed it down. Using different brushes, he created swampland and jungle and tree-studded savanna, gorillas, elephants, and lions. A slender, supple, boom-slang snake trailed its venomous length over her shoulder. There was so much he wanted to draw, but so little space. By now, he had covered Ekwethi's entire back, and little remained. Tribal custom would not permit him to trespass upon the delicate planes of her face. He returned to her front as she squealed and excitedly looked at her body. "Oh, this is wonderful, Amadi. Plants and yams and a big snake. Are you finished? I can't wait to go to the lake to see my back." Amadi circled her, waving his brush. For a moment in his excitement, a grill on her back seemed to move. "There is still one spot I must cover, Ekwethi." Reverently, he touched the area above her breasts. She looked down at her chest, then gave him a mischievous smile. "What will you put here?" "The best of it all, Ekwethi, a symbol of you." She bit her forefinger with white, sharp teeth. "Oh, what is it? Tell me." "No, I'll show you. But first, do you like my work?" "Oh, yes." She leapt up and hugged him for one heavenly moment. Then, like a cat, she returned to her chair. "Do it quick, Amati. I want to see what it is." Trembling in delight, he selected another brush and returned to his colors. Then he started to create what was for him the most beautiful and deadly animal of them all, the leopard. Tawny and black-spotted, its sleek, powerful form promised death to anything that came too near. Finally, tired but glowing with fulfillment, Amati laid his brush down. "It's done," he said simply. Ekwesi jumped up immediately. She eyed his addition, then glanced at him with bright, glassy eyes. In them, Amati saw no love at all, and no appreciation of his art. To her leopard soul, he was simply prey of another kind, and had already served his purpose. "I must show my friends." Feeling empty, he followed her outside, where the young people of the village, especially the young men, gathered about her with admiring eyes. She moved sinuously among them, laughing at the girl's envy. And I have a break there, and I'm just going to read you one short paragraph in conclusion. What happens after he paints her body with a living
Tapestry.
portrait, mural, back? Here's the beginning. The first villager died in the early evening. Torn limb from limb by a giant gorilla, with an hysterical child, which an hysterical child said had entered the forest. Since gorillas seldom even approached the village and were harmless unless provoked, the child was widely doubted. But there was no doubting the mangled corpse that lay in the dirt, or its fear-filled face. Thank you.